Godzilla is a franchise that spans all the way back in 1954, created by a man named Tomoyuki Tanaka for Toho, and is one of the most famous things to ever come out of Japan, along with the likes of anime, Nintendo, and Hello Kitty, to name a few. For a kid back in the 80s and 90s, it was a little tough trying to watch a Godzilla film. You either had to look into every rental shop you could for a stray movie to rent, or look through the TV guide to see if any happened to be on. But for a Godzilla fan, the hassle was worth it. He's been all over the world and even space, fighting monsters just as big or even bigger than he was. And of course, when you have an icon like the King here, you gotta give him games. He's been on a variety of consoles, but for an American kid back then, the only one you knew of was a little game on the NES, Godzilla Monster of Monsters. Now, I have early memories of this ever since I was just a baby kaiju. It was the third game ever that I played, the first two being Ninja Gaiden and Ghosts and Goblins. Yeah, I was that kid. Eventually, I would play games that were a little better, but this introduced me to the idea of Godzilla, and ever since I've been a huge fan. Anyway, I think I've wasted your time long enough. Time to pop her in and see what I've been missing for so long. Hey, Big G, I know you're a little excited about your game, but do you gotta stand in front of the title like that? In 2000X AD, the Earth receives a declaration of war. Okay, let me just save you the time reading this and say, aliens are invading from Planet X, and they want to enslave the human race. So it's up to Godzilla and Mothra to beat each baddie back and restore peace or whatever. And how do we do that? With chess! As close to chess as it can get. Let me explain. Each space here is a level. Godzilla can move 2 spaces and Mothra 4. Each space you move, you gotta play it. The other monsters can move, but you don't gotta watch them play it, thank God. Once you get over to them, though, from the other side, you gotta fight them. That's the whole goal here. Beat up all the monsters, then get to that space with the dome on it, and beat the level to proceed. It does this weird thing where after you beat the dome level, it doesn't just take your monster to the next world. You gotta tell the game you want to go to the next planet. Why would I ever want to say no? What's even weirder is you gotta do it with both monsters, but if you get one out and your other monster dies on the way, it counts as a game over? Why? My monster respawns if they make it to the next planet, so why not just have it go to the next planet with my monsters all ready to go? As you fight and beat other monsters, you'll notice Godzilla and Mothra has their own XP and level. Reach the cap, you get a level. It raises your HP as well as your power, and you're gonna need every last level up just to make it through this game. Trust me. And of course you can't see it, so you just have to hope for a level up after each monster's beaten. Every planet has the monsters you beat come back, but it just adds one on top of it, so it's a gauntlet. Fair enough, I guess they had to figure something out back in 1989 to pad things out. I don't blame them, especially when the sprite work looks so good. That's one thing I really like about this game. The graphics themselves are amazing. You can see each individual detail on the monsters, and the worlds you stomp around in are never boring visually. Speaking of worlds, while you're moving towards your enemy, you'll be fighting all sorts of weird and crazy shit. You got your alien UFOs and your rockets out of nowhere, plenty of rocks, direct TV dishes, pixels on the wall, and running away from debris in the sky. Each level's got its own hazards, as well as unique enemies in certain stages, and some of them drop item pickups for your health and power bar later in the game. Now, about fighting the other monsters. You got strange picks like Hedorah here, who wasn't even in the movies at this point. There was only stock footage of the character. He isn't too hard until he starts doing this shit. Next monster is Mogara, and I found this weird glitch where if I go in as Godzilla, I can push him into the corner and beat his ass like he just got cancelled in the QRTs. Yeah, how do you like that, game? I can do it back! After that, Mars is next, and naturally, volcanoes. You got some new enemies, of course, like Manda snaking out of the scenery, and this one weird rocket that... just rips you a new breathing hole by running straight through your head! And you can't even kill it either! These things are indestructible! Trust me, not even an atomic breath can stop it! The only thing you can do is kinda glide it away from you, or pray to whatever god's listening to let you live long enough to find a pickup! Naturally, I got clipped to death and lost Godzilla. That means I can't use him until I get to the next planet, and that means I gotta use Mothra the whole time! Thankfully, she's well equipped to deal with everything here. She's got eye projectiles and she can drop her wings. That's like literally throwing your hands. But don't let that fool you, it's very useful for the stages as it just dominates at the later levels after you grind it enough. Not so much bosses though. Speaking of bosses, thankfully Mothra can handle herself. Her eye lasers are projectiles and most of these goons don't have any of those. Varen's next, and he's an absolute joke. Strangely, Varen has some of the better music here. By the way, the music is really good. Each monster, as well as the planets themselves, have a theme, and each one is just awesome. Varen here just so happens to have one of the better themes, but the fight's too easy. Next is Jupiter, and most of the stage is green, green, and more green. You'll be fighting plants along the walls, plants floating in the air, asparagus, and Kabu Kabu from Kirby. The enemy kaiju here is Hedorah, the Smog monster. His fight is relatively easy, all you gotta do is sit in one spot and fire. That's basically what your strategy for the game is. Find a spot they can't hit you, and bombs away. Sure, you might get kicked out like I did, but keep going back into the fight and they'll never heal, leaving them pretty susceptible. Saturn's our next destination, and you'll finally be breaking buildings! That already look broken, but don't think for a second that there's no resistance. They're fully loaded, and I find Godzilla has a harder time hitting these guns, or Gatling parts, or whatever they are, with basic attacks. Best to spam your atomic breath here, whenever possible, just so you're not stuck trying to find the magic pixel of a spot to smack with your claws. Baragon's the next fight, and this one's a little tricky seeing as he's low to the ground. Mothra has a bit of a harder time since he's so low, and the strange part is because he's so low to the ground, you'd think using your crop dusting attack might work, but there's a hitbox high up in the air that stops you from doing so. It pushes you back and it gets a little hard trying to aim those wings. And not only this, but he has a lunge attack that hurts you too, so it might be best to just use Godzilla here. You're probing Uranus next, and you're in what's sort of a small area where the monsters are within practically grabbing distance. It's also here where the levels are consistently nothing but Mogara, a giant jellyfish creature that came from space. These guys I feel are the best way to get more pickups, as these guys don't put up much of a fight. You're apparently fighting cells, and it's a quick trek to the other side. Just don't think too hard about it and move on. On this planet you'll be fighting Gigan, and let me tell you, he is not easy. This is where the game starts getting unfair. Remember on the first boss where Hedorah could push you up against the wall without consent? Yeah, he can do that too, but actually hurt you with his buzzsaw. I didn't learn until a little later after grinding that the best way to stop him is to do the same thing you did with Hedorah. Find a spot with Mothra and let him have it. He can't shoot you with his eye lasers, and he can't grind you into moth dust thanks to that little pushback. At this point, you're probably realizing by now that I'm using Mothra a hell of a lot in this game. That's because she's better equipped for all the challenges ahead, whereas most of the time, Godzilla can barely keep up. Oh sure, Atomic Breath is fantastic as always, but he doesn't have projectiles like Mothra does, so he's constantly in danger's way. Sometimes the AI can be essentially cheesed, but once you get up to Gigan, good freaking luck. If you lose Mothra in any of these fights, you can essentially kiss your run goodbye. Thankfully, you can always just return to this planet with loading your game from the menu, which it kicks you back to. Just be careful not to choose the wrong option, as like all games from this era, your progress is pretty much gone if you accidentally press the wrong button. There are passcodes, but it doesn't tell you any. Pluto's next, and... Pluto, these were much better times for you. Anyway, it's here that you can find Mechagodzilla with Gigan and Baragon tucked on both of his sides. This fight is goddamn ridiculous because he barely uses any energy for his eye lasers, and he can spam it all he wants. He can hit hard, and if you come into this fight as Godzilla, you sent him to an early grave. As Mothra, though, you're at full advantage here. Just float underneath his head and fire away. He'll never get a hit out on you, and you'll do enough damage. You'll get kicked from the fight, a bunch of times of course, but just keep at it, and you'll eventually kick this oversized bucket of bolts to the curb. Up next is Neptune, and strangely there's no added monster. This is just Pluto again, but every monster you've faced so far in a bigger arena. Since there's nobody to explain now, I might as well use this to give you a pro tip. People have said online that you can't advance past the monster that you're facing, right? Well, that's not entirely true. They never said anything about backing up. If you ever find yourself low on health, or if a monster of yours isn't equipped well enough to fight against somebody, just move backwards. You'll be able to rack up some health through the stages, and if you're lucky, you'll bag a level or two. And here we are at the final stretch of the game, Planet X. The final boss here is naturally King Hedorah, and he's stuck away at the very end, meaning that you have to go past every single monster thus far in order to reach him. He never moves from his spot and forces you to fight him yourself, and I can say wholeheartedly that Hedorah is a cheating bitch. He will absolutely punish you no matter which monster you go in with. Oh god, his hurt noises. Jesus! Hedorah, drop your balls already! So of course I used Mothra first, but found that he can do the same thing Godzilla does, hurting you all the same with additional damage from his lightning breath. So you know what I did? I had to throw Mothra in this fight to do as much damage as humanly possible before going in and finishing the job as Godzilla. Yeah, you might say that it's a little cheap, but you know what? I beat this game. My effort speaks for itself. I am not afraid to cheat, just like this game. Of course, as soon as you defeat King Hedorah, the game's not over. You still have to, for whatever reason, travel to the dome space and beat the level. Why do you have to do that? Just take me to the end screen. I already beat the final boss. What's the point? No, well, if you end up losing either monster to King Hedorah and you lose your last monster here, that's just game over. You have to restart the entire level all over again. That, to me, is incredibly cheap. Anyway, after you do what the game tells you to do regardless, you finally get the end screen. And honestly, it's pretty damn good. It's satisfying to see Godzilla and Mothra looking back at Earth, and the story finale comes in a slow crawl. It's the aliens pretty much saying, "I'll be back," and that's it. You do get a roll call of the monsters, and I find it funny that they show off a scrapped sprite of Hedorah's saucer mode. There's a bunch of interesting scrapped things here, so let me go through what I found before I give you my final thoughts. Some fans went through the code and found sprite data for Rodan and Anguirus, two very known monsters that have come up quite a bunch in Godzilla's history. Anguirus doesn't have any attacks, but has more of a destructive walk, while Rodan can't even be accessed. All we found was sprite data for his playing piece on the board, and that's unfortunately all there is to him. One more piece of trivia, and this one you can actually do yourself if you feel like it. If you type in Hedorah on the password screen with 1s and 0s, it'll take you to an unfinished level with no graphics whatsoever and even a hidden song. It's the strangest thing that they never took this out, but I'm glad they didn't. We would have never known about it until many years later, more than likely. Overall, I still have a soft spot for this game as I did years ago. While the gameplay is a little clunky, the music is still great, the sprite work is even better, and all the little tidbits that I found were fun to find. Now that I'm older and I know who these monsters are, I found it really cool that they brought these relatively obscure monsters to the 8-bit screen. What's even cooler than that is that this game would become so infamous because of a certain angry nerd that it would even inspire a creepypasta, one of the best ones I've ever read. It would even get a sequel that's still being worked on to this day. If you get curious, all you have to do is just Google up Godzilla NES. It's a fascinating read, and I highly recommend it to anyone who loves horror stories. This game means a lot to me. It's not just a game that I played early in my youth. It was something that would bring me to find others in the Godzilla community years later, that would even inspire me to start doing these kind of videos. And to them I say thank you from the bottom of my heart, for giving me the push that I needed to do what I've wanted to do for so long, but never had the heart to. I hope that upon doing this, I can give you many years of entertainment. And I want to thank you guys, the ones watching the video right now. Yeah, you guys are just as important as the people that pushed me to this. If you liked what I had to say or found me entertaining, please hit the like and subscribe button. It'll help support the channel, and if you want to be a real badass, why not donate to my Patreon? Anyway, thanks again, and see you next time.